Next up is Auden Schendler. He's the chairman of the board of Protect Our Winters and the vice president of sustainability for the Auden Skiing Company. Auden is clearly the most passionate person in the ski industry about sustainability and global warming. He's lectured at Harvard, Yale, Google, and Starbucks, as well as to second graders and Chilean kayakers. He'll talk to anyone who will listen about this topic. How about a warm welcome for Auden Schendler? Laser pointer on this? Is there a laser pointer on this? There's not. No, okay.
So, I'm here to attest that Winston Binch's ideas aren't always good. Last night, he and I got involved in a bunch of bourbon drinking, and then layered on top of that some fondue raclette. And it didn't play out well. It's not a great idea. But a piece of that idea is actually the answer to the question I'm here to provide today, which is, in my last session at the lunch, I talked about the challenge of climate change. It's a real hazard to your future, your business, your family, and the economics and morality of the future. And how do you go about solving this problem? What do you actually do? Well, the thing you got to do is get a bottle of bourbon and sit down and think deeply with a group of people about what your big leverage is. And often that leverage involves speaking out. So I'm going to run through some semi-innovative stuff that we've thought about on this. You know, corporate sustainability in the past has been do highway cleanup programs and green your own company. The problem is, in the context of climate change, the darker the red in these pictures, the greater the temperature anomaly over the last century, and this was 2012. You remember that winter, and you remember what it did to your business. This is a game changer. It's not enough to focus on your own house and keeping that in order. You have to think more broadly. And the other problem is that with climate, if you do nothing, the consequences are far greater than if you do something to address it and solve the problem. This is a book by William Nordhaus, a conservative economist at Yale, that says if you don't do anything, it's going to be $4.1 trillion in cost. And we fought wars over that, lesser sums than that. The other thing you have to think about is climate as a business disruption issue, not snow going away. When a road gets destroyed, it has implications for all kinds of different things in business. This is the base lodge at Killington, which was destroyed by severe weather after Hurricane Irene. So, how do you be innovative about talking about this? This is a report that Protect Our Winters conceived, and the idea was when we go to Washington, we didn't have anything to say to Congress people. And so we spent $5,000, this shoestring organization, and produced an economic study of what it costs communities when you don't have snow. And it turned out that a good snow year versus a bad snow year nationally is about $1 billion. California can speak to this now after 3 bad years. So this was a $5,000 report, and then we partnered with the Natural Resources Defense Council to release it. And it was such a sexy idea, and NRDC was so effective as a giant nonprofit working on the environment, that we got 350 hits in international media, including every major media outlet, the New York Times 5 or 6 times, and it's still being covered. This is a nonprofit that's being very cost-effective with dollars through creativity and innovation. Again, reducing your carbon footprint if you're a corporation is nice and you should do it, but it doesn't get you there. You have to think more aggressively. So Auden Skiing Company a few years ago was given the opportunity to sign on to an amicus brief on a lawsuit called Massachusetts versus EPA. I got that call. And I said to the person on the phone, yeah, we can do that. I just have 2 questions. What's an amicus brief and what's Mass v. EPA? And it turned out that Mass v. EPA is the most important environmental lawsuit in the history of the environmental movement. It was supported 5-4 by the Supreme Court, and that created climate policy in the United States because it said CO2 is a pollutant that we have to regulate under the Clean Air Act. There's just been another opportunity to influence change using an amicus brief, which is a weird thing. You don't think of a corporation or an environmental director at a corporation filing these kind of things. But in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is this region in Denver, being tried as we speak, is a marriage equality bill. And we signed on to that thinking, hey, this makes sense. We have gay customers, employees. This is a human dignity question in the same way that climate was. We filed the brief, and then we saw who else was on that. Google, Starbucks, Cisco, and at the very bottom of the list, Vail. So Aspen, Snowmass, and Vail are using political leverage to drive change on progressive issues. That's what you need to do. And on climate, there are multiple opportunities to do this. We were early in our work trying to reduce our carbon footprint, and we realized it was going up, there was nothing we could do, and it was because the utility had just bought a coal plant. So we started digging into the nature of our utility, and we found out it was a publicly elected board. And so we started calling people and saying, would you run for the board of your utility? And this is community organizing. And they said, why would I run for the board of utility? Sounds like the most boring thing you could ever possibly do. And we said, you're right, it's really boring. But this is some of the most important work you can do. It's your big lever as an individual. So we recruited people to run, and we supported their campaigns, and we used a special innovative technique to win utility board elections. We ran women. And just because they were women, they won. Turns out this utility had never elected a woman to the board, and I went in and I said, you guys have never had a woman on the board. And a 92-year-old guy said, that's incorrect. There was a woman on the board in 1937. So we also daylit this issue, called the press and said, will you talk about this election in the paper? It's the most important thing happening on energy in the next year. And they said, why would we do that? It's so boring to talk about utility politics. And we said, yes, but you got to do it. It's really important. And they covered it. We had another situation. Again, this is opportunistic innovation. We got a call and someone said, will you ban Kleenex? And we said, ban Kleenex? Why? They said, well, the owner, Kimberly Clark, is logging endangered forests, is not listening to the environmental community, and uses no post-consumer waste in their tissue. And we joined the boycott, along with 700 other companies. Who cares? We're Aspen. We spend $30,000 on tissue a year. But because we're Aspen, and this is the big lever, and many of you in the audience have a similar lever, the CEO of Kimberly Clark did not want us to boycott Kleenex. And we got a phone call where the CEO wanted to talk to our CEO. In the military, we call this asymmetric warfare. You have a very teeny corporation like ours winning a battle against, in this case, $30 billion corporation, bigger than half the countries in the world. Kimberly Clark did change. It wasn't us that made it happen. It was the whole boycott, but we were part of that. This is the kind of activation you have to get to. Protect Our Winners, and one thing I'd ask you to do is go onto Facebook and friend Protect Our Winners now and look at what they advise you to do on a daily basis and educate yourself, and you will learn. This group goes to Washington. In this picture, you have the famed mountaineer Conrad Anker, you have Chris Davenport, you have the head of SIA, David Injemi, all going to DC and saying, this is a business issue. We ought to move on this. So it's a tremendous problem, but we know how to solve it. And I'm going to skip that because I'm running out of time. But the problem with the solution is that it requires you to step out of your comfort zone. Look at the picture. Look at the woman behind Elizabeth Eckford, who was one of the Little Rock Nine who integrated a high school. Look, have you ever had anyone look at you, other than your wife or husband, with that expression on their face? It's incredibly uncomfortable. But it's the way we're going to move forward. If you're a CEO or a business leader, all you have to do to move the ball on climate is to speak out publicly about the need for action. You can pick conservative policy approaches that are supported by the left and the right. And will it be worth it? Well, was that worth it? It was painful. Look at Ruby Bridges in the bottom there, her expression of set determination. And Elizabeth Eckford, how awful and painful it was to do that. Was it worth it? That was the most important thing that happened in America in the last 150 years in terms of social equity. Yeah, it was worth it. And you can participate on this too, on an issue that's equally important and an equal threat to our dignity. Thank you very much.